All right, welcome back to the channel. Let's talk this boxing. It's your boy Fanon. And in this video, we're going to talk about reports coming out of the UK that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is considering a massive rematch with a certain Mr. Oscar De La Hoya. Not sure whether it's an exhibition or not, but let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. Before we get into the subject matter of the video though, please make sure if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. Also, thank you guys very much for all the support that you give me in the channel. Hit that bell icon so that you can get notified of when we release videos, and make sure you hit get all notifications. All right, so let's get into this. Reports came out of the UK, or coming out of the UK, that Oscar De La Hoya and Floyd Mayweather Jr. Are at least in initial talks, or Oscar De La Hoya is pushing the idea to Floyd Mayweather Jr. Not clear, got a couple different reports on it about those two guys having an exhibition fight or a fight together that they believe where they can do 5 million pay-per-view buys, which would mean an absolute massive amount of money in that particular fight. My thoughts on it is, man, first of all, with Floyd Mayweather Jr., dude, I'm not going to rule anything out. There's a lot of conversations. The first instinct for me to say is, yeah, I'm sure that Oscar De La Hoya wants that fight. I'm not too sure if Floyd Mayweather Jr. wants that fight. However, if they do want that fight, I'm telling you, I would be very happy if they made that fight. I would feel like because when I watched the original fight between the original exhibition that kicked off a lot of this exhibition talk, which was Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr., I was very dismissive of that entire notion going into it, and really initially did not watch the fight, right? Didn't buy the pay-per-view, which is on Triller, and thought to myself, oh man, this is just kind of silly. You know, Mike Tyson is far gone, Roy Jones Jr. is far gone, and I don't really want to see the fight. However, and I go back, when I went back, people were like, no, Fanon, you really got to, or Martin, man, you got to go back and look at that fight. It was a very, very good fight, really entertaining fight. Definitely go check that fight out. So I went back, I got a copy of the fight, I watched the fight, and I was like, this is a very, very good fight. Everything was really slowed down. Roy Jones Jr. was not the Roy Jones Jr. that Roy Jones Jr. used to be. Obviously, Mike Tyson was not the Mike Tyson that he was in his heyday either. But just seeing the two of those guys in the ring and seeing those guys pretty much give it, you know, a serious go at it, you could see the technique that they had. And also just the fanfare and the appreciation that you have for the fighters kind of comes back. So as a one-time thing for Mike Tyson, I'm really glad that he and Roy Jones Jr. did that fight. And, you know, for the people that are going to say, oh man, you know, there's no way that this fight, you know, can happen between Oscar and Floyd. You know, anything is possible, man. And if Oscar De La Hoya is pushing it and they really do believe that they can make that type of money, you know, in that fight, and, you know, he mentioned things about all kind of different distribution mechanisms and all that, which allow them to make even more money. You know, I wouldn't write it off that Floyd Mayweather would do something like that. And to be honest with you, I would much rather see Floyd do an exhibition with Oscar De La Hoya than see Floyd Mayweather Jr. doing exhibitions with Logan Paul, or seeing him do exhibitions with, I guess, Money Kicks and, you know, to whatever his name, Tekashi 6ix9ine out there in Japan. You know, those fights for me were nothing. Like, you know, I didn't know the guy, and it was no really intrigue for the fight for me. It was just something to see Oscar De La Hoya back in the ring. But if he was, Floyd Mayweather Jr. back in the ring. But if he was to get in there with Oscar De La Hoya, man, that would be very, very fun. It would be, you know, if they did it in a way where it was, you know, they were both kind of had good spirits with one another, man, it could actually be very entertaining. They could put a lot of fights around it. And a one-off, man, I wouldn't take that. I would not mind that at all. Oscar De La Hoya is a fighter that You know, I'm telling you, man, when he was originally going to have his exhibition where he kind of sold out on the exhibition, I think he said he got COVID or something. Dude, I was really kind of looking forward to that. You know, I had seen him in the sparring ahead of time and his workouts ahead of time, and he didn't really look that sharp. But, you know, I would not have minded seeing him get in the ring as long as it's a situation where it's, you know, kind of a safe situation. Dude, Oscar De La Hoya, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of him in the world, you know, when he was fighting, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that you could really appreciate about that dude's career. Like the fact that he fought everybody, you know, he fought a bunch of guys, you know, that there's not very many people rather that people said he should fight, that he didn't fight. It was always a very, very competitive fight. And it would just be nice, you know, just for the whole surrounding to see something like that. It would be a really big event. I would probably pay for the pay-per-view. I'm sure a lot of other people would pay for that pay-per-view. And like I said, I would take that type of exhibition boxing over a Jake Paul fighting an MMA guy, you know, in mismatches where you have one guy that is just, you know, drastically smaller than the other guy, and, you know, trying to hype that up as real boxing. In the case of, you know, of Floyd and Oscar De La Hoya, if they were going to do that, you could have different professional fighters, you know, on the undercard, you know, legitimate top level fighters on the undercard, because there's so much money in that fight that, you know, that there's no way that they couldn't afford to do and pay significant money on that. But also at the same time, you know, because when Oscar De La Hoya is saying he thinks this thing could do 5 million pay-per-views, I don't know if it's going to do 5 million pay-per-views or what it's going to do, you know, because of people stealing pay-per-views and this, that. But I will tell you this, that both Oscar De La Hoya and Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s names at their peak are bigger than anybody's name in boxing right now. And really, you know, Floyd Mayweather Jr., truth be told, people are always asking, you know, who's the face of boxing? Who's the face of boxing? Floyd Mayweather Jr. is still the face of boxing. When people think of boxing, the number one guy in the world right now is still Floyd Mayweather Jr., even though he's sitting on that sideline. So I would take the fight. I wouldn't mind it at all. You know, how likely is it that it will happen? It's as likely as a lot of these major professional fights happening, you know, and actually it has fewer things encumbering it actually happening. But obviously the biggest thing is that Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Oscar De La Hoya do not get along. And Floyd Mayweather Jr. may very well feel, you know, still hold some grudges from Floyd Mayweather Jr. when Floyd took Canelo and left from Showtime and went over there to HBO, you know, and the back and forth that those guys had. He says he believes Oscar De La Hoya is disloyal, all of that. You know, that is, if anything, that I think would probably be what would hold it up. And the fact that Floyd Mayweather Jr. has so many other options to make a lot of money. But, you know, I'll keep an eye on it. You know, it's for me, you know, I don't do videos talking about Jake Paul and God, what's his name? Tyron Woodley, or, you know, Nate Robinson and Jake Paul. Don't do any of that. Didn't even watch other than the highlights, the Floyd Mayweather Jr. Logan Paul fight. But in instances like this, man, if they were going to do it, telling you, I would not miss it a second time. And I certainly hope, you know, if they're going to come back and they're going to do it, why not do this? You know, as long as they're not doing it over and over and trying to, you know, basically beat each other's brains in over a series of fights, you know, why not? But again, it's not, more than likely it's not going to happen, but you can say that about a whole lot of fights in boxing. Will Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua fight ever happen? More than likely not. Will Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr. fight? Man, probably, but probably pushing on, probably not. Right? All kind of different fights we have the same conversations with, and that's the problem in boxing. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.